All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba European Roots, with that Caribbean soul, a refreshing German lager in a can. Pick up a six-pack of Johnny Cuba, your local Sedanos, Presidente, Winn-Dixie. That's how you can get ready for the finals tomorrow, the Stanley Cup Finals on Saturday. Make sure you always drink responsibly, and don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Joining us now, ESPN Sports Center, the legendary Linda Cohn here with us. Now, Linda, if I think of great Ranger fans, I think of Linda Cohn, all right? Now, have you recovered? I'm obviously a huge Florida Panther fan. Are you doing all right several days removed now?
Yeah, I am. The Florida Panthers. And thanks for having me, Jonathan. Yes, I am the ultimate Ranger fan. I don't hide my fandom. I think that's one of the big reasons for my longevity and success in my career, because I've always been a fan first, and I always felt I could relate to the viewers that way, and the radio listeners, because I'm one of them. May not be the same team, but I'm one of them. So, yes, have I gotten over it? I sure have. Was I severely disappointed? Yes, I was, like all Ranger fans. When you win the President's Trophy, you have high hopes, but we went up against the President's Trophy killer in the Florida Panthers. And Rangers have a lot of work to do to get in a position to be as good as the Florida Panthers. And where does that start? Well, getting players that are built for the playoffs. And that's exactly what Florida has. That's why I picked them in 7 against Edmonton. This was a tough call for me, and we can get into that later. But I just feel that Florida was opportunistic. They somehow beat the greatest goalie in the league, in Igor Shesterkin, who remind me of Henrik Lundqvist when the Rangers went to the final in 2014, when Lundqvist carried that team on his back, only to be sitting alone in the dressing room after a devastating overtime loss to the Kings in the Stanley Cup Final in overtime, where he just did everything he could to put the Rangers in that position. And if it wasn't for Igor Shesterkin, I said it, I think I tweeted this out when it was going on. I mean, the Rangers would have lost in 5. Maybe they would have been swept. Their core group is just not built for the playoffs, and they were exhausted. And kudos to Florida, because they created that exhaustion with their physical play, and their core group was much better, obviously, than the Rangers core group.
Now, you've always done a great job representing the Rangers and, of course, letting everyone know you're a huge hockey fan. How great is it, by the way, these last few years, I guess now, 2 or 3 years since ESPN, TNT as well, got the rights back to the National Hockey League. All the coverage now, like I'm doing ESPN radio tonight from 7 to 10 p.m. and I'm not afraid to talk about the Stanley Cup Finals because there's so much more coverage now on ESPN. It's so great.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about it, and I've been around ESPN long enough to remember when ESPN aired the NHL and had the broadcast rights back in the day, and it was superlative. It was fantastic. It was tremendous. And, I pay attention to social media. Now, I'm not, since my skills, according to my bosses, were much needed doing nightly sports centers here in LA. I have been, after being a part of our ESPN hockey coverage when we got it back. So I have not been a part of it this year, and I feel that void because of it. But I think TNT and ESPN, what it has meant by those two major networks having the NHL is the fact that, just what you said, Jonathan, when you do your radio show, you're not pausing and saying, "Oh, I'm told nobody cares about hockey, or nobody cares about the NHL, and I'll spend 30 seconds on it." Well, now you can do whatever you want because ESPN has the broadcast rights with TNT, and it truly is the 4th major sport. And actually, I think it's the 3rd, because I think baseball has fallen off the map and has become more regional than the NHL.
It's so great with what the Florida Panthers are doing down here. As a Ranger fan, and you mentioned they were in the Cup 10 years ago. And of course, last time they won the Cup was a long time ago, 30 years. But the Rangers are almost always a really good team. And right now here in South Florida, we're going through the golden era of Panther hockey. The team's been around for 30 years, but this is the first time ever they've made the playoffs for 4 straight years now. Forget back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals. So we're like longtime huge Panther fans like myself. We're experiencing something we've never experienced before. It's so cool.
Yeah, it is cool and it's really exciting and it's fantastic for the state of Florida. I know Tampa Bay Lightning is the arch rival there, but when you look at the state of Florida and both of these teams and the consistency of winning that we have seen in the last decade, it's fantastic for the league. And they weren't crazy, obviously, so long ago when they decided to put teams in Florida, and the Floridians are getting the last laugh there. I think that I am so impressed that to get the Panthers doing something that only 6 teams have done before, and that is get back to a Stanley Cup final after losing
Yeah.
in the Stanley Cup. I mean, people don't get it. And let me educate you how tough it is. I know not you, Jonathan, but maybe your listeners. That, maybe in the NBA that happens. Maybe, all that kind of, it's a different game. The Stanley Cup postseason is physically draining. You hear now, like always, after every team is eliminated, you hear about the injuries that these players have
Yeah.
played with. The Rangers captain Jacob Trouba, I'm a big fan of his. Yeah, maybe people say, "Oh, Linda, you're just a homer," but this guy is tremendous effort he gives. Great character. I know some of his hits are dicey. I get it. Evan Rodriguez, the whole thing, but he played the whole series with a broken ankle. He played it like most of the postseason with a broken ankle. To me, that just blows my mind. And I know Adam Fox also wasn't 100%. We don't know exactly what that was either. I'm not making excuses, but my point is all of these players in the NHL postseason, the Stanley Cup playoffs, once they're eliminated, you find out all these injuries that they played with. And sadly, last year for the Panthers, we all know, if Matthew Tkachuk was healthy, down the stretch, it might have been a different series there against Vegas.
I was explaining to my 15-year-old son the other day as we're watching the start of Game 6, and at shoot around that morning, Carter Verhaeghe took a puck to the face. He got a bunch of stitches, but okay, he's still going to play. And so I'm talking about it with my son. I go, an NBA player, he'd have to retire, all right, if he took a puck to the face. And I'm saying to him, I go, these guys are the best. It's all about, there's no I. It's all we. They're out there. They're playing for each other. They're playing for their teammates. If they were to show up in the dressing room before the game and they weren't ready to play, they'd be embarrassed to be around their teammates. It's such a different sport.
And especially with this Florida Panthers team. Because, I heard a conversation yesterday on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio about, well, if the Panthers win the cup, who is going to be the Conn Smythe winner? And I know we have another series to play, but that's making my point. You could pick 6 guys right now that could win the Conn Smythe. Seriously, on the Panthers. And that to me, that's why I like them against Edmonton by a sliver. Plus I think they have the edge in goaltending, and you know how I know a thing or two about goaltending since I was a goalie back in the day. But I think that's the big thing there, that they are so deep, that they do play as a team, and everyone could be a hero on that team. And and can we talk about Gus Forsling, please?
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
oh my God,
Amazing.
he's one of the 6 guys or 5 guys that could win the Conn Smythe right now. He is amazing, and all these other teams are like, how did we miss this guy? You know what I mean? And kudos to Florida and their incredible management and organization from top to bottom, who, picked up Forsling and he's like saying you're welcome, and thank you in his way here. And he's been one of the leaders on this Panthers team. It's just I love these kind of stories where players are like forgotten about and then suddenly they super rise to the occasion. And you watched it front row seat, Jonathan. You know what he has meant to this team.
I think a lot of people now know Gus Forsling, but around the middle of this playoff, I've been saying he's the best defenseman in the league that nobody's heard of.
Yeah.
He is a star, and another guy who I think has also becoming a household name. And if you want to talk about Conn Smythe, I would think could be the front runner right now. A guy who got a second chance with the Panthers, Sam Bennett. I mean, Sam Bennett, they traded for a few years ago from Calgary. He was the number 3 overall pick in that draft, which, by the way, the Panthers have three of the top four picks from that draft: Ekblad, Reinhart, Bennett, and then he got Leon Draisaitl with Edmonton. So all four of those guys from that draft are in this series. But Sam Bennett has been phenomenal.
Talk about scoring big goals, right? I mean, just ask the Rangers. That's what Sam Bennett did. Somehow found the net at the right time and in overtime, the whole thing. But you know what? As we look ahead against Edmonton, I think, as I mentioned, one of the 5 or 6 that could win the Conn Smythe right now. I think Matthew Tkachuk could be my front runner because of what he's about to do against the Edmonton Oilers. He's healthy, and we all have to remember there's a bit of a rivalry, the Calgary
Yeah.
Flame days, right? I know you probably have talked about that ad nauseum, but I just think Matthew Tkachuk loves playing against Edmonton. He goes into another gear if that's possible. I'm a big fan of his from day one, and I think if Florida is going to win the Stanley Cup, I think the big reason, I think he's going to just lead them there. And Sasha Barkov, of course, what a great captain. He's done everything. He's done all those. You've seen it. He does all the little things that also isn't on the scoreboard. But I like Matthew Tkachuk to take the lead here. I think it would be fitting for this Panthers team, because I do believe he is the face of this franchise of late.
Linda, what do you make of the whole touching or not touching the Prince of Wales trophy?
You know what? One thing that's going to happen in the Stanley Cup Final, we will continue to be thoroughly entertained by head coach Paul Maurice, because that was a precious moment after they eliminated the Rangers, and when Maurice leaned over to his captain Sasha Barkov and said, "Don't touch it, don't touch it." I'm superstitious. I get it. It hasn't worked before when they touched it, so don't touch it. So I got no problem with that. I get it. I understand it. It's the language of all professional athletes. I'd say, I've covered every sport like you. I mean, I think 75% of pro athletes are severely superstitious. So I got no problem with them not touching it. And it's nothing to do with if they're confident or not confident or need the universe to give them a boost. No, they just figure, let's mix it up and let's not touch it.
Linda, how great for, the Panther fan down here who maybe isn't as ingratiated with the entire league, especially because Edmonton, Western Conference, and we're all the way out here in the Southeast. How great is Connor McDavid?
Oh, my goodness. Talk about a guy carrying a team on his back. And I know there are superstars on that team, but he's the best. We all know this. He is the best player in the NHL. He has been for several years, and he is showing it. This is his 9th season with his Oilers team, and he's finally got to a Cup final. Um, it's going to me, the most intriguing matchup is going to be Barkov and Forsling, and how are they going to contain Connor McDavid. And I know you got Leon Draisaitl hanging out, ready to do the one-timer, the side of the net, and somehow find room. But Connor McDavid, it's going to be great that the world is, because a lot of people, not only in Florida, but there are a lot of people here in the States that the only hockey they'll watch is in the Stanley Cup Final, right? I mean, that's what they'll watch. Those are the only games they'll watch of a hockey season. And they'll really see what's so amazing about Connor McDavid. Now it's up to Florida, and they're suffocating forecheck and physicality to make sure that Connor McDavid doesn't take over this series. And that's why I think it's going to be 7 games, because Florida has never seen a team like this team now, like the Oilers are constructed under Chris Knobloch, the guy who took over, as we all know, in December, I guess it was.
I mean, they
And
were 2-9-1, Linda, and
yeah, it's
like, it's
remarkable.
incredible.
Well, he not only changed the culture, but he changed the way they play, their system. And defense is now their first name, not their last name, for the Edmonton Oilers. It's true. Excuse me. And let me take a drink. Hang on.
Yeah,
Mm.
sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So that's important. I mean, and we've seen it. We saw it against Dallas, like Edmonton beat Dallas at their own game. Playing, keeping the scoring down, and them scoring just enough to win games. And so Connor McDavid, maybe we'll see some spectacular goals like we saw against Dallas in the clinching game. But even if we don't see that, he's all for everyone contributing on that team and playing defense. And another big key, what I love about this matchup, Florida against Edmonton, is the special teams. They're both great on each
Yeah.
team. Both great. I mean, penalty kill, great. Power play, great. They both. So kudos to Florida because everybody was like, oh my God. But have we looked at Florida's power play percentage? I think it's second to Edmonton if I last looked. And so that's a great matchup as well. But what I was saying earlier, Florida hasn't seen a team like Edmonton yet in the way they're constructed now, and Edmonton hasn't faced a team like Florida yet. And that's what makes this Stanley Cup final so exciting.
So, Linda, I'll let you go with this. You already said to us you have the Panthers in 7. I love the ESPN.com expert picks when we get to the NBA Finals. So I imagine those picks will come out probably either today or tomorrow, and the Stanley Cup expert picks will probably come out on Friday at the end of the week. I love counting up. I love seeing who picks the Panthers and then seeing who's sus. So you have the Panthers. We're going to see that on ESPN.com.
Yep.
How many games did you pick the Panthers?
7. It's going to be 7 because I think, again, Edmonton's going to find a way because of those two guys, McDavid and Draisaitl, and even throw in Zach Hyman or Evan Bouchard. They're going to find ways. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. It's going 7. I mean, it's going to take a little warming up period for both teams. And, can I just throw in another X factor here? I think the way Florida, wasn't like last year. I know Florida was banged up last year big time, and they still got to a cup final. But Sergei Bobrovsky last year had to be, do things, do saves and somersaults and be acrobatic like we've never seen him before. What's great about this year and why I feel good about Florida is that he hasn't had to work that as hard as he had to last season.
His defense has been so good in front of him.
Amazing. I mean, it reminds me, and I use this, I said this on SiriusXM, I said, the way Florida plays reminds me, but they're much more exciting than the team I'm about to mention. But Florida reminds me of the way they play defense, 5-on-5 defense, not just the two backliners. It's the way the Devils of back in the day used to play, suffocating, and Marty Brodeur only had to make 19, 21 saves a game, okay? And that will help Sergei Bobrovsky, who's 35 years old. That is going to help him so much. All this rest, plus he didn't have to kill himself. He only made a few great saves that he was called upon to make, and he did it. And Florida has to keep that up, and I believe they can.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Linda. Linda, always love catching up with you. Thank you so much for coming. Of course, you can hear Linda every now and then, hosting on Mad Dog Radio on SiriusXM, and of course, legendary SportsCenter anchor as well. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining us. Enjoy the Cup Finals.
Yes, you as well, and thanks for having me.